Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we are based, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay their respect to their elders past and present.
Would you like to introduce yourself just briefly, your name and what your current role is?
Sure. So my name is Sasha, and I'm currently a lecturer with computer science and engineering at UNSW. Living the dream.
It's great to have you here. Yes, before we start going into and talk about the contents of this episode, we'd like to explore a bit about your early childhood and educational career, and maybe talk a bit about how you ended up into pursuing computer science.
I've always loved STEM. I've always maths was always my favorite subject when I was at school. And both my parents were engineers, and when I was 6, my uncle built a whole computer with me next to him, like very old school. So I was brought up not in Australia, where it wasn't like and so it was quite special. Everything came late to where I was brought up. And so so I kind of had this exposure to just technical people, and my uncle also, he liked to take things apart and put them back together, have extra parts left over, and I really picked up that bug from him as well. Just can't love taking things apart, tinkering and seeing what's extra and what we can do without. So I guess that kind of continued through my whole schooling as well, and just all I wanted to do was more maths. And then as I got a bit older, probably like I don't know, 11, 12, I started to really become interested in computing and computers. And then I don't know, does anyone really know what they want to do when they're in year 11, 12? You just kind of put down anything. I knew I wanted to do engineering. I knew I couldn't do some types of engineering, and it was just a process of elimination. And actually, in my first year of doing computing, I almost dropped out to go to a pure maths degree. So, but I ended up sticking with it. So, yeah.
What made you want to drop and then stick to it after?
First year computing is really hard. Your first taste of programming is really hard because you're in a class with students that have programmed since they were in the womb, what feels like, and if it's your first real taste of programming, then you really feel it. And because for me, I like to tinker with the hardware bits. Software was not what I like to do, so I guess I was not I was new to programming. I was more putting things together and more the 𝐀𝐻𝐿 side, but I didn't actually realize that that was what I did. Do computer engineering because I wanted to do hardware.
Well, yeah, I forgot to intro myself at the beginning, but I'm currently studying aero and material science, completely unrelated to today's topics. But I remember doing Comp 1511 when in first year, and I had no prior coding experience back in high school. And it just seemed like, just there were people who were doing who knew the course inside out.
It's a lot. And I think because it's then I went into education, so then I got a background of that, and it's a lot because you're learning a whole new language, and people don't, for some reason, they don't see, if you were learning French or Spanish, it's so hard to do. You just learn the language and you just learn the rules of that language. But in computing, you're learning the rules of the language, you're learning the syntax, but you're also learning how to solve problems that you've never solved before. So it's very, very overloading. There's a lot happening and a lot you have to bring together. So it's actually, they're really complex courses.
Sorry, I did a bit of research into your LinkedIn profile. You did a master's of research in usability of telehealth on the elderly. I was wondering if there was anything interesting that you learned from that.
Well, I think there's always something interesting, and I guess older people use computing. It's very different for them because they didn't grow up with computing. Even for me, I didn't really grow up with modern computing, but it's just that I just really love everything about it. So, but it's really hard if you didn't grow up with it. And, you know, things like telehealth are really, really important because it allows us, especially in Australia, we have such remote communities. It allows us to have, and really, this was before the pandemic. I think if anything, the pandemic has shown us how important it is to have these sorts of things in place. But, you want to make it approachable, accessible for people that are older to be able to use these and to not be scared of computers and computing. And that's the whole thing in itself. It's quite hard to do. I remember even like when my grandmother was around, she couldn't even use the remote control for the TV. I had to cover off half the buttons for her, tape them across, big point arrow to what she needs to press, color them in with nail polish because they're all the same colors. They're tiny. You can barely tell what's going on. So it kind of like, and that's a remote control. That's not a whole system that's able to like measure your blood pressure, weigh you, make sure you've taken the right medication. How do you put that together? So that was really interesting work because I got to go out to nursing homes and work with the people as well, and kind of see the gaps in like having this system, but then they just couldn't really use it for the most part. They didn't really, especially when it's a touch screen, there's no physical affordance to anything. They really struggled with, that they have to press something that's not actually a button. It's just like it's a rectangle. Yes, it has some shadowing, but it's very abstract still. It's just that we're so used to these types of concepts, but for older people, it's much harder to really use and understand.
I think that's really interesting. Then what were some of the ways that I guess like you would do that? Would you more teach them how to use it, or would you change the kind of way or buttons look, or how physical like it is to kind of press on them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, well, I think and there's a lot of research now in like making things more customizable and personal. Actually, I read an article the other day that you can they did this study where they personalized fonts, and they found that people were able to read faster and comprehend more when they had a font that was like personally selected for them. And that's something so little, but it makes such a big difference. And so I think if you're able to customize these interfaces for what that person needs, and colors, like you've got so much like macular degeneration and stuff, your eyesight gets worse, your hearing gets worse. It's just part of growing up. And so customizing all of those things, because perhaps, your eyesight's great, but your hearing's going, and so on and so forth. So actually making it fit for the person is really important, and how they would use something. And it's all about so I was all about hardware until about third year of computing, when I first did human computer interaction, and it really spoke to me. And that's when I was like, okay, user-centered design, this is definitely where it's at, because otherwise I'm creating something that no one can use. So I think having that kind of the interface in between the two is really important, and making sure the person can use it. Otherwise, you can have an amazing product that is useless.
Yeah, totally agree. That's really true. Yeah. And especially with the human computer interaction course. I know I'm really keen to do that course too. I hear you're taking that course as well, and as teaching that course, I guess.
I haven't taught it for a few years now, but yeah, I used to teach it. I love that course. But there's, we're now bringing it into 𝐷𝐶𝑁 as well, some of those concepts, to give everyone an early exposure to these concepts, because otherwise it's an elective. Some people don't do it. And so, I don't know, as computing people, we're very that makes all the sense in the world. It doesn't matter that it's cryptic to anyone else, and you just got blinkers on. You can't see that you're not like the average user in computing. And I think you forget that often. So I think it's really important in the beginning of your degree as well to be exposed to the fact that you are not the standard user. You are someone who's super experienced with technology and computing. You're very comfortable around it. you know, and you can do lots of things that others cannot do.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. I think, yeah, I see that you're like bringing all like your passions in like having the user-centric stuff and all the I guess computer science space all into like what you're teaching in the education side of things. And so I guess that brings me to like, I'm really curious with how you are finding all the like working as an academic at UNSW, and how like you're able to bring all your passions through that as well.
Okay. So I was in industry for like 10 years, but I have always really loved teaching, and I guess the pull was too strong, so I came back. My PhD is actually in education because I really was fascinated how people learn. So like what I love is like the cognitive load stuff, because it really helps us to understand how we think, how we learn, and how to design materials so that they are approachable by, you know, to people. And that's I guess the human centered side of it as well, because it's how we design interfaces as well, and how we make everything so that it's, you know, it's palatable to users. How do you actually, you know, it's actually such a hard thing to do, and design is really, really, really hard to make. You know, to actually make something that is usable is actually a lot harder than it sounds.
I guess before we I don't know, go deeper into the design considerations and features, I was just wondering, because you mentioned you went into industry for 10 years. Could you like kind of just describe what kind of experiences or learnings you got from there as well?
Yeah. I guess lots of stuff of how to work with different types of people. I think, you know, the soft skills are really important, how to be a team player and how to communicate with different personalities, you know, and make sure that you can kind of come together and still produce something. I worked a long time as a testing engineer as well, which is actually like one of the most, well, I think everyone in comp should really, you know, do a little stint as a testing engineer, because first, who doesn't like to break things? And that's your whole job. But second, it also really allows you to see, you know, the mistakes are always so common. They're almost always, you know, the same issues that you see over and over again. But it also allows you to go across as well, like how to write good requirements and how to make sure that a system is spec'd out well so that you know what on earth you're actually testing. And then it kind of allows you to go everywhere, and poke your nose in everything. And it's fun, I think. Well, I think it's fun. Probably others don't. But yeah, I think, yeah, I had fun as a testing engineer, and then then I was a project engineer, so I kind of worked more with the requirements side of things. But having the testing background allowed me to know what kinds of questions to ask and how to create, you know, user stories and requirements that are actually measurable and testable, and that, you know, you got to talk to the customer, you got to talk to the people that are actually using it, you got to find a common ground there as well. So back to that user-centered design. So it allowed me to bring that to the table as well.
Sorry, could you elaborate on what the role of the project? Yeah.
So as a project engineer, I was looking after a system, and basically like looking after the whole process, kind of like a project manager, but you're
right.
you're on the technical side of things.
Okay. Were there any possible examples you're able to share when working as a project?
I'm trying to I think like the hardest part of these jobs is the fact that you're working in a team of people. And we in computing, there's a lot of very clever people that also think. There's a lot of very nice people as well, but we often, you know, we do think we're God's gift to, you know, humankind, because we are. But you know, like, so it's like it's kind of like, if someone, that's the hardest part of the job, is you've got 3 developers, they all think they're solving the right way,
right.
but in fact that is not the case. In fact, all three of them are wrong, and something else is needed. They're not even meeting the requirement, but they're so set that they've got the right idea over everything else. That's the hardest part to manage, and you'll get so much of that. Well, I found that to be the case. I think it's a lot better now, because I think at universities they're doing a lot more of like the importance of requirements, the importance of like user stories, the importance of like teamwork and stuff. When I was at uni, it was not, I think it was like third year the first time I saw some requirements, and it was very basic as well. So it's changing. It's slowly shifting to be important aspects as well of computing.
Right. So so to my understanding, it's like understanding the whole purpose and like or I guess the purpose of this technical application you're creating, and not just I don't know, designing for because you have the technical capabilities. So I don't know.
Yeah, so this system was like a really like a technically challenging system that is used in quite a few cities internationally as well, and it is a infrastructure which is like safety critical and stuff. So you need to have someone who has the technical understanding, but also someone that has the other side of the coin as well, like user-centric design understanding. But you need someone who understands the technical aspect of it as well, so that because you're interfacing with a lot of other systems as well.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. I guess moving on, and then you transitioned back to your role as an academic, right? I think
Yeah,
you came back to UNSW.
I did.
What kind of like, I don't know, made you switch, or was there a particular experience that you've touched on before maybe?
I've always loved teaching, so I got an opportunity to work, to do my PhD with John Sweller, who was like the father of cognitive load theory, and 𝐀𝐿𝐴 𝐂𝐿𝐴, who's also like amazing research and just amazing research. So it was just, and I really love learning actually. Like if I could be a lifelong student, sign me up. Which is, I know, a weird thing to say, not courses, just more like researching and reading papers and like just learning stuff for the sake of learning, which I think that is missing a little bit. Everything is about marks these days, which is understandable, but it makes it really hard to enjoy your learning, which is like really what university should be.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting point. We can probably circle back to that towards the end. About how to get through uni and stuff, and what kind of mindset. I guess the other point you mentioned about learning, or the passion for learning, is this something you try to like instill is this something you try to instill in your students as well as you teach, and how do you kind of do this as a lecturer or tutor?
Well, I don't know. I think that, and from when I was a student, you can really feel when a teacher loves what they do, and it gives you the vibes as well. And so, I don't know, I'm always excited about a lot of things. So sometimes I'll get into a problem so much that I'll just forget everyone else is there. And I think like people can feel that as well. And then they, kind of everyone else gets excited as well. And I really miss actually having people in the lecture theatre, because I miss like moving around. And yeah, I used to have lectures where people would come down and I get them to code whilst I talk and stuff. And I don't know, I think that's still missing, because it just really, I don't know, it sets the whole mood. But I think it's really just enjoying what you do and being passionate about it as well. And that's really quite infectious.
Yeah, that's fair. I think the element of in-person or interactive learning, has been affected by COVID. I think I don't know, for one of my courses, or they've been trying to integrate like interactive tutorials in the middle of live lectures. So it's kind of interesting. as to what different methods different courses are doing. I just wanted to also touch on, like, because I'm not sure if you've taught, actually to ask you, have you taught like younger students as well?
I have.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I guess because as part of the like one of EWB's programs, we go out to primary and high schools to teach different engineering modules to kind of develop passion for STEM and further education in this space. I guess, like, yeah, what are your thoughts on, like, the idea of, like, of volunteering your time as a uni student, and, like, or no matter where you are, I guess, and being able to teach future generations. I just wanted to if you could, like, share some thoughts to incite some of our volunteers.
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. And I used to do it as a student as well. And I think not only are you kind of giving something back, but you're actually getting a lot from it as well, and seeing, I don't know, I find it so my thesis is actually about how small kids get their first understanding of numbers and how they kind of pick up that building block of abstract concepts. So I've worked with kids before, and I mean, if you don't want to work with kids, there's got to be they're amazing to work with. They come up with the best ideas because they're not yet boxed in by these preconceived notions. They're not yet boxed in by any of these, like, understanding of things that we might have. They are amazing. I think you get so much out of it, like, I think more than what you put in, kind of thing, almost. And one thing that's really important, I think, for kids to see as they are going through the school system is, first of all the possibilities of STEM, because for some reason it's not really obvious what the choices are, but also, like, a diversity of different people in STEM as well. I think it's really important to be able to see someone that you can think, oh, they're like me, I could be this person. And I think that really kind of, encourages you. Like, I guess there's not that many females in computing. I think we're sitting at, I don't know, 15-20%. It's still pretty poor effort. And then just diversity in general. It's so important to have different it's important for you to see different types of people doing the same thing that you might be interested in, but also opening that door for you. Because I think actually in Engineers Australia, they had this article that if in school your family kind of didn't have the exposure to, like, engineering or, like, STEM-based subjects, you're pretty much not going to put that down as your choices at uni, because they're not, it's not an obvious choice unless you've been exposed to it. So exposing students to it early, it gives them options, and it lets them know what is possible for them. And also, like, we just build such cool things. I think kids love that sort of stuff, and it's so much fun. Yeah. We're like some of the only people where, we're like, oh, I think I want to build an app, and then you can just go and do it. Nothing's stopping you.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think, yeah, no, that's pretty inspiring. And yeah, the exposure point, yeah, I think is definitely very important. I think without, I guess, yeah, I like looking back at my experiences. Yeah, I definitely was more in the privileged sense, and was able to gain that initial exposure. Otherwise, I don't know. I think who knows where I would have ended up. Yeah.
You could have still found your way to STEM. You just don't know.
Yeah. I guess yeah, it's interesting because I think I don't know how much thought or comments you'd have on this topic, but I read a recent article, like, from SMH, saying that there was a survey conducted, a few thousand teachers saying they would, leave the profession, consider leaving the profession due to various reasons. I was wondering if you had any thoughts on, like, the industry, I guess, as a whole.
I think teachers are amazing, and the last few years have been so challenging to be a teacher, especially when you're teaching primary school kids. I mean, how do you engage online with a group of, 6 or 7-year-olds? It's hard enough to do in the classroom, let alone, when you are just a picture on the screen and they can go off and do whatever they want, distracted by everything under the sun. And it's really, as a teacher, you spend it's such a hard job, because you have to plan the lessons. You have to know each child in your classroom. You really have to know their strengths. You can, and they all have varying levels of expertise. They're all at different levels because of the way, school, really, we do school based on years, how old you are. That's what defines where you are at, what you're learning, which, I don't know, there are pros and cons for it, I suppose, but then it means that in the classroom, you might have someone, who's just learning how to read, someone that's, reading chapter books, someone else who's, an absolute, gifted student. So how do you cater to all of those needs? It's very difficult. And, all the reporting that teachers have to do, it is all encompassing, and a lot more hours than what the school day is as well. They do an amazing job. And I mean, I don't know. I don't think people go into teaching because they want to make good money, because it's not great money. I think they go into it because they love teaching. And so there's only so long that you can kind of use and abuse that. It's not enough to do that. They can have better hours, spend more time with their families. And it's a really hard job. Have you ever been in the classroom with 8-year-old kids?
Yeah, a few times on the outreach programs.
Yeah,
maybe.
it's hard work. I think I was done after 3 hours. I was like, what is this? I'm spending the whole time just trying to control them, here, there, everywhere. And, you spend I don't know. That's why I think everyone should go and stand in the classroom with kids for 2 hours, and then they'll realize this is not that easy.
Yeah. I think that the impact that teachers have, or the primary high school teachers, is huge.
Huge.
I don't know about the appreciation for teachers, though. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think in Australia as well, it's not a respected it's not as respected a profession as it is in other places around the world. And it's a shame, because you're right. I still not just remember, but I can a few teachers made a lasting impact on me and the way they treated me. And it wasn't even about anything they taught me. It was just about how they treated me and how they made you feel as well about your own abilities and, as a person, just in general, just the more important lessons that they did teach you. And I'll forever be sort of grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah. I guess, no, that's interesting. I think maybe could move on to, we can circle back to the designing with accessibility in mind, maybe. Yeah.
So I guess I forgot to intro a bit earlier, but I'm actually doing software engineering, and in the 𝐀𝐿𝐻𝐿 course that you're teaching this term, and
I thought your name looked familiar.
That's so funny. And I think I know that a lot of this course we did a lot of stuff with accessibility in mind, and I feel like some of the insights that you're saying are too good not to share to, I guess, a wider audience. I guess because not everyone does 𝐀𝐿𝐻 2000 if they're doing just comp sci or even any other engineering streams as well. And so in terms of learning a bit more with accessibility in design. So I guess to start this conversation off, how would you then define accessibility in the context of design?
Okay, so I think I'll have to go back to when I was 5 years old, and this is the story that started my obsession with sort of whether this makes sense or not. So, and I think I shared this story in 𝐻𝐿𝐻 as well, but here you go, you'll have to hear it again. My grandmother had no phone, and her neighbors did have a phone, but both of the neighbors were deaf. Okay, so the phone would ring, and the only way that they knew was ringing, that the light above their door would start flickering. So unless they were sitting and looking at this door, which, you know, as if you're going to do that for the rest of your day, they wouldn't. It's just if they chance to look up and, oh, that light's flickering, yeah, I'll answer the phone. And, you know, when you're 5 or 6, it just suddenly like kind of gets into your mind, like, this is insane. Like, how would you solve this problem? This doesn't seem like a difficult problem to solve. Like, and so that kind of started this, like, you know, thinking, not that I had the terms for it, not that I knew what any of it meant, but that always stands out to me as kind of like what started me obsessing about these types of solutions. And, you know, making something accessible is making it accessible to people with, you know, disabilities, but also then it benefits so many others. You know, you have a slow internet connection, those accessibility elements would benefit you as well. You know, I don't know, you've broken your arm today, so then you have limited motor movements. Yeah, okay, it's only going to be 6 weeks, but it still affects how you're going to use something. You know, you're standing outside in the sun like I am, you can see the sun behind me. So, you know, are you going to squint at the screen? Can you see the screen? What can you actually, so it like has much bigger ramifications, you know, and also, like, it's like 15% of the population has some sort of disability. Why would you not consider them in your design? That is a lot of people. And, you know, I guess in terms of like, I guess morally and ethically, you know, how else, you know, why would we continually not include them in society? And so much of our society now functions online, and everything is online. It would, you know, that's pretty bad. And it doesn't make sense to do that. Why wouldn't you try and, you know, develop something that really is for everyone? And if you're just designing for, you know, just the average user, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah, definitely. That's so true. Like the importance of taking into account all the accessibility kind of things, like you said, can also be applied to like the general population as well. I know in the lectures that you had that really good example of how the typewriter was created was because I guess the person creating it wanted to have their blind lover to be able to write messages to them without having to have like a scribe for them. And I thought that was like a really good example of how you would build for accessibility, but then it becomes like relevant to the rest of it.
I love those, you know, everything really you know, even text messages, it started as something for deaf people, and then they realized, hang on a second, it's not using a lot of bandwidth. This is excellent. And, you know, no one even calls anymore. Everyone just texts. So it had such a much wider reach as well. Lots of these concepts start out as, you know, an accessibility concept, and then it's, you know, and then it is so much bigger than, you know, than just pigeonholing, because it's really, these are really, and it's so easy to, you know, to incorporate some of these even simple things. So it's frustrating when no one thinks about them, or they're an afterthought. They don't come in, because you should really be thinking about it to start with as well, not, you know, oh, we haven't done any accessibility, right, let's just pop in a few buttons and tick a few boxes, done. So it's yeah,
that's quite true. Yeah, I guess in that kind of context, that would be what we'd consider like inclusive design, I guess. And I remember you mentioned how that's a bit different to I think universal design.
Yeah. So universal design is designing for as many people as possible to use this, you know, one thing. And then accessibility is almost part of inclusive design, because inclusive design is designing for people with disabilities. So they all relate, but they're all slightly different, because inclusive design is including everyone in your design, you know, and it's something as simple as, you know, the drop down, you know, having Mr. and Mrs. and, you know, and that's it. You know, well, what if I don't want either one of those? Like, what if I don't define myself as a Mr. or Mrs. or a Miss? You know, then what happens then? You know, I'm left to feel maybe lesser than, and there is that you've got to put something down. Usually it's a, you know, a Dropbox that won't let you just not put anything down. So, you know, that's something so simple that you can do that includes so many more people.
Yeah, definitely. These like small frustrations can like really be, I guess, accounted for if we, thought about it in like the really early stages, I guess. And I guess like in terms of making those decisions to influence how you design stuff with accessibility in mind, how would you, I guess, go about that to kind of make sure that you are inclusive and include everyone in like the early stages of when you're designing something?
Yeah, so it comes to involving people with varying needs as well early on in the process, testing with people of varying needs as well early on, but having those personas and scenarios centered around people, you know, with differing needs as well, so that you're not just, you don't just have three personas that are really all the same thing. So it's, you know, it's having someone there always at the forefront that, you know, your user story is centered around, that you're always keeping it at the forefront, and then testing it with those actual users. And I think, you know, Microsoft, they did a whole thing where they, you know, with their Xbox, like with the like accessible gaming and stuff, you know, they actually invited people in that had accessibility requirements, and they really kind of workshopped with them what they use, how they use it, how they play, what is important, what's not as important, and they really structured kind of the whole experience around that. So they talked actually to the people that it's for, which, you know, you'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's so true. I think, yes, that's like really interesting. So I guess we've talked about, how we collect all that information for the different problems that people with accessibility kind of struggle with. And then once we have all the kind of problems, then what are some like ways we might go about solving for accessibility in like that regard? So would if someone does have an accessibility in hard hearing, would it just be to provide a second medium to look for it? And what are some decisions in terms of like what that second medium would be and all that kind of stuff, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I guess you've got the guidelines to kind of help you along, and the guidelines have examples in them and potential solutions, but that, you know, sometimes those potential solutions also box you into solutions. So, you know, the world's your oyster. You talk to that person, find out how they do things on a daily basis. How do they interact with what you're trying to design for them? You know, how would they interact with this? What is their relationship to it? What do they do on a daily basis? You know, the hard of hearing, how does it impact their life? And that kind of really helps you build a whole picture of how you can, what solution you can have for them as well, you know, because, you know, I mean, obviously transcripts, subtitles, all of those things are easy things that you can implement straight away, but it's not always possible. So what else, you know, what else is there? And you only get that when you can empathize with the user. So you go out and you understand what it is that they do on a daily basis. So you really understand their needs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, just for people who might not be doing the Design 2000 in the 𝐀𝐻 stream, the guidelines that you were referring to, I think the website guidelines for accessibility.
Yeah, the web content accessibility guidelines.
That was like really interesting when you talked about that, and also some small aspects of, I guess, the look of an interface and designing that for accessibility, such as I think font decisions being serif or sans serif and all that. And I remember reading lecture slides for another lecturer who they had blue text on a blue background and black text on top, and then I think a serif font as well. And I was wondering why I was having trouble reading it. And then I just immediately remembered your lecture where you were like, oh, there's a contrast ratio where that might make it difficult. And also the serif fonts.
Yeah, it's, I mean, and it's like small things, but they impact everyone. So, you know, you don't wear glasses, do you? I mean, I wear contacts, but even I would not be able to, you know, some black on blue. Oh, what were they thinking? Why wouldn't you make that white? That would have a very small contrast ratio. That would not pass the guidelines.
Definitely, yeah. And I think you've also taken these accessibility considerations a lot in the gaming sphere, which I really love how you use examples of gaming in the lecture slides. It does make it a lot more relatable, because I think the Venn diagram between like software engineers and gaming, they're like the same almost, I think. But I think you bring a good point in one of your lectures where how do you make gaming a bit more accessible if part of the game is like kind of specific? Like, I think one example you used was how do you make Mario Kart like available for people who cannot see?
Yeah, you know, that's really hard. I've tried. I put a blindfold on, and like I tried to check everything that I could do to see whether you could really do it or not. And there's I forgot what there's a website that rates every game on accessibility out of 10, and it like kind of tells you if you can play it or not. But I think, you know, these are important things that are coming out. Like, yeah, I can't think of a way to do it like Mario Kart without being able to see, but I'm sure there is a way, you know. It's just left to figure out what is that way. You could try and you know, I'm sure you can, because you can have haptic feedback when you've gone to the sides, you know, of the lanes that will, you know, buzz to let you know that you're hitting the sides. And you can have a different, like you can have varying pulses to let you know if, you know, someone's coming up behind you, which it's already doing. It already pulses when someone, so there's, you know, and then you can have like the feedback to let you know to stay in your lanes, or like to indicate where you're going. You could still have sound to also you know, build the path for you and stuff. So that there's things that you can do, which, you know, it could actually make a really exciting game. Right, off I go after this.
I'm really curious, like, do you have like a background in like, I think game design or making like ethical game design? Because like you use it as, yeah, a lot of examples, and I'm like, you must play a lot of games, or you like just know a lot about that.
Yeah, so I love board games, and I used to play a lot of games in my younger years, a lot of games. I really stopped because, you know, I have the weird, like my vestibular system, when the 3D games just first started, they were very jarring, and I used to vomit a lot when I played them. That's kind of when I stopped playing as much. And this is why I still love Mario, because you can play, you know, 2D, no problems. It doesn't jar. But yeah, so I've been very interested in how like the design thinking process can be applied to like game design as well. And because game design is all about a story that you're telling, it's not, you know, the development stuff comes much later. First, you need to actually design something that's interesting, and that's a story, and that's, you know, that kind of sings to the person and keeps someone playing and keeps them interested and engaged. And I think, yeah, and there's going to be a course. I got so excited. We're reviving a course that hasn't run for 9 years. It's going to be the game design workshop, and it's going to be all about game design and how to tell that story and how to make something that's amazing.
Oh, as a side note, do you know what that course code is?
Is it 442? Oh my gosh, I'm teaching the course and I don't know what 4421, I think.
Okay, I just need to jot that down. Thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely note that down and help promote that. No, it's interesting. Sorry to intrude. I was just wondering, because it's so obviously designing accessibility with mind for these games is pretty important, because it enables more people to play these games. I was just wondering if there were any further like whether this could be applied, or like these improvements could be taken into like real world situations, if that makes sense, or if there's any instances of that.
Yeah, and you know, like for me, you know, the start of it is really like, so when I was a kid, I mean, even now, one of my cousins has like he's on a list for a heart transplant. So he was born with a congenital heart condition. So he couldn't really run or anything because he was always out of breath. And so as kids, you can either leave him behind, which is not that nice, or you modify all of your games to fit a different like tempo, and you cut down the running but you add something else that he can do. And so those ideas, I think everyone is doing them. We were not the only ones that were modifying our games based on the abilities of the people there or what they can do. And so I think that's something, and that's young kids playing games. It's not even as grown-ups, why do we suddenly decide that that's no longer time to do that? Like, why wouldn't we make small changes to include everyone as well? And so all of this, I guess the reason I love the game design and accessibility so much is because these are stories and engaging experiences. It allows people to participate, but also if they can do it, I'm sorry, a simple news website can do it, can do a better job then as well. Like, it's much harder to implement these types of things in games than it is in simple information-based websites as well. So I don't know, if the games are starting to move that way, which is finally it's time to, then it would be amazing if everyone kind of started to put that at the foreground as well.
Yeah, definitely when I was growing up as well, I enjoyed playing different types of games, like mobile games and PC and stuff. I was just wondering if but as I was playing this, there was also a strong notion from my parents, to not let me play and focus on other things as well. I was just wondering, what your thoughts were on that, and whether you think there are potentially other benefits to the side of gaming that people can learn.
I mean, everything in moderation, isn't it? Play a game, go outside, play another game. But I think, I don't know, I guess, yeah, like I've got young kids and, I'll play Mario Kart with them.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I love Mario Kart, so it doesn't really count. But it means that everyone's involved in the game together. I think that's a big part of it. The whole point of gaming is that, I think, the big part of it is that social connection and community. And I think if you're playing together, I don't know, I guess everyone's always against screens, but I mean, they have a place in our life. We all look at our screens, and isn't it better to be able to learn how to use those types of things responsibly and be able to, it's only a problem if you can't stop. As is everything, in life. If you know I'm going to play for a few hours, well, why not? If you're enjoying it and it provides you, stress relief or whatever else, if you're enjoying it, if you're having fun, it's important to have fun in life.
Yeah, that kind of makes me think about, like, when you said if you can stop playing games or not, kind of thing. When you discussed the idea of, like, I guess, dark patterns and all that. So like in like in like when you have an app or something, those dark patterns can occur, and I guess what might be the balance between that keeping your users to keep using the app versus the ethical, I guess, moral boundaries of the dark patterns. And if you wanted to explain what dark patterns were as well.
Yeah, so I mean, dark patterns are really patterns that are designed not for the good of the people, things to keep you going, or things to like trick you, or things that not help you, basically. And really, they're becoming illegal for the most part. Then I guess there's a space there for like questionable patterns that are not quite dark patterns, but they're questionable. And you really don't want to I don't know, look, you're writing the moral high ground, but if you've ever looked at YouTube for kids, my goodness, that's a lot of questionable patterns right there. And I don't know, how would I feel if I worked for them? I don't know. It's a hard, but that's not a good design. That's not morally, that's a bit
Interesting. I mean, it's good to hear that there's some kind of body out there that checks these black patterns of dark patterns.
Yeah, well, you can complain, same as and then so there's a whole series of them that are illegal.
Interesting. I guess a bit conscious of time. I guess in the remaining few minutes, we might just skip to the very last point, or that point about, I guess, yeah, maybe just your 2 cents on for students getting through or still studying university right now. Yeah, like what kind of advice and do you have for
Try
students?
to enjoy it. It is like I know it's really hard, and the trimesters are very intense. There's a lot of work to do. And you know, really nothing is wrong if you feel like doing 2 subjects a term and your degree takes you longer. You know, try, because you want to do other things outside of studying as well, you know, play sport, play games, you know, go out with friends. That's what this time is for as well. It's not just, you know, it's to actually enjoy the learning and to be able to have the time to, you know, go and read something extra if you want to, or go and read up on a certain topic. But just, yeah, be nice to yourselves. The last 2 years, I think, for students have been quite difficult, and you know, things are coming back, but very slowly. I feel like everyone's got COVID, and it's like, you know, then, you know, everyone's exhausted and they still have to study, and it's really taking a toll. So I think be nice to yourselves, and don't worry if your degree takes you longer. Why not? Who cares? My partner took 7 years to do a 4-year degree. He had a great time.
That's quite relieving. Yeah, I think to be honest, I've extended my degree as well, partially. But yeah, I think in the grand scheme, it doesn't matter too much.
No,
So,
it doesn't at
yeah.
all. You've got your whole life to
Mm.
to work in industry and to do all of that stuff. This is your time to, I don't know, have fun and travel and explore like what you want to do as well, because you want to be doing a degree that brings you joy, where it's not really that much of an effort to study these courses, because that's what you'll be doing then for 8 hours a day or more. So you you want to be enjoying it as well.
Mm. Yeah. Were there any other points or any other points you wanted to raise, Winnie?
I think that's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
It was like, yes, had a really good discussion on the accessibility and your whole journey as well. Which is like exciting, because yeah, I just really love what you say about accessibility in Design 2000, and just really thought it's a really good conversation to have and share to wider
I'm
audience.
so glad that it's getting out there as well, because I was so worried that people are going to be like, oh, this is a bit boring. So because I get very excited by it, because I think there's so much to it. But this is really, thank you so much. It's really nice to know that you know, that students are enjoying the content as well, because yeah, I think that's important as well.
Yeah.
I think 𝐷𝐸𝐿 is there for you to enjoy. I think it's a great course. Not biased, of course, but I think it's, I don't know, it's kind of fun. It's, you know, you get to solve a problem. That's what engineering's all about.
Mm. No, I think it's interesting. Even as I guess someone who doesn't take the course, the topics talked about is pretty illuminating. I think, I don't know, like as a person who doesn't put as much consideration into these things, it's like I see more of the end products or outcomes, like the changes that get made. And sometimes I'm like, I think recently Gmail, the interface kind of changed recently, and I didn't really like the change at first, but it's interesting, like that, you know, a lot of thought gets put into these types of these things. But yeah, I think yeah, I'm happy to kind of wrap up here.
Thank you both for having me.
No, thank you as well.